Right, good morning everybody and welcome to Rail Live. And we could moan about the weather, but who's actually happy that for Rail Live regulars, who's happy that we can actually breathe and we're not sweltering already? It makes a nice change, doesn't it? Let's not be moaning. Okay, so good morning everyone, as I've already said. Thank you very much for attending. My name's Lucy Pryor, I'm your host for the day. I am just chairing these four wonderful brains on stage. So rather than me do the speaking for you, I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves. So what's your name and where do you come from? But if you could also please just reflect a little bit on the topic that we're discussing today. So we're talking about devolution alongside GBR and how to make sure that freight and the combined authorities each get their say and that everybody's getting the fair consideration. And so, starting to my left with yourself, Maggie.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you all for coming along to get out of at least the damp, but we'll take that. So thank you and pleasure to be here. I'm Maggie Simpson. I'm the Director General of the Rail Freight Group. We're a member-led trade association representing around about 130 businesses who are busy in some way, shape or form in the rail freight industry. And as an organisation, we're really involved in trying to make sure that rail reform works for our members in rail freight, as well, obviously, as for everybody else in the passenger railway and indeed the mayoral authorities. And we know that, rail reform is a significant change. Obviously, even just, the reintegration of track and train in itself is a big change. But the rules around track access, charging, capacity allocation and so on, which are being changed as a byproduct of rail reform, are really, really important to freight and how freight feels about the future alongside GBR. I think the question of devolution and devolution to the mayors is really interesting for us because it's a topic that cuts in both directions. So one can easily see the power of local devolution, having empowered managers able to take the right decisions, do the right things, is obviously a good thing, and that's good for freight where it happens on the ground as well. But freight is also a national business, it's a global business, shipping containers that have come in from Singapore and are making their way to customers in Barrow-on-Furness don't really much care which mayoral authority they're running through. They need that journey to be seamless. And where we've got mayoral authorities who quite reasonably have got ambitions for an enhanced passenger service, those new capacity rules are really important too, to make sure that capacity is distributed fairly and equitably. So we've got a lot in common and a lot where we're on opposite sides of the same coin, I'd say, with the mayoral authorities. It's a really interesting space. I'm very happy to talk about it today.
Thank you. Over to you, not Mal.
Yes, hello everybody. I'm Peter Sargent, Head of Rail Policy and Strategy at West Midlands Rail Executive, and I'm unfortunately not Mal Drury-Rhodes today, who unfortunately couldn't make it. However, I've worked my entire career in the devolved railway. I started working at Centro, the West Midlands Passenger Transport Executive, back in 1990, and have seen how local priorities fit with national priorities throughout my career. So there's been a long period of change. When I started, the passenger transport executives had agreements with British Rail, and to some extent, ironically, we're now going back to a very similar model, whereby we end up with the local transport authorities having agreements in place with a national Great British Railways. So we need to learn from the past, but certainly we've been through a lot of change, and certainly we were, Centro were co-signatories to the Central Trains franchise for 10 years. That probably gave us a lot of oversight and control of local rail. We've been through various iterations since then, and we currently have a collaboration agreement with the DfT, which sees us have an influence over the West Midlands trains, not franchise anymore. So we've had a lot of experience in terms of how, in the West Midlands, a devolved railway can work with a national railway, and certainly in the West Midlands, being at the heart of the national rail network, the local services have to work in between freight services, regional services, intercity services, and getting the balance when you have a capacity-constrained network is really, really key. West Midlands Rail Executive isn't a passenger transport executive. And we're not a combined authority either. However, a combined authority, West Midlands Combined Authority is our member, but our membership goes a lot wider than that, and we cover the entirety of the West Midlands region, going out to Warwickshire, Staffordshire, Shropshire, etc., because rail can only really be planned and delivered on a sort of a regional basis and not really constrained to mayoral combined authority areas. So we're hoping to use all our experience at our team to make sure that when we move forwards with devolution, we can get agreements in place with Great British Railways and the Department of Transport to ensure that, we can get a local rail network that works and integrates effectively with the wider multimodal transport network in our area, because we need to see rail as part of the wider national network, but also part of an integrated public transport network as well. And it's making sure we've got the levers to pull to see that, rail needs to be seen both ways, strategically, but locally as well. So, looking forward to the chat. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Over to yourself, Jason.
Hello, so my name is Jason Prince. I am the director of an organisation called the Urban Transport Group. We're effectively the trade body for local transport authorities, born out from the old LTAs many moons ago. And then over the past probably 3 to 5 years, we've evolved. We represent 90 members as of this month, but our members are your TfLs, your Greater Manchester, your West Yorkshires, all some of the really big, as are now combined authorities and MSAs, but also we have a number of smaller members. And also, this is the first time I've been to Rail Live, and I'm geeking out. I mean, seriously. I am a secret rail geek. My YouTube history is a testament to that. So yes, it's great to be here. Really interesting topic today. I think first and foremost, there's a lot of, it feels like it may be different to how it feels on the ground for many of you, but from where I'm sitting, it feels like we're going through quite a bit of high-level change. There's a lot of things which are being said about what should be done to the railway and how the railway needs to change and things like that. So I think that's the space sort of I operate in, and trying to work with our members about actually what does that look like, whether that's an operating model under GBR, how will an operating model work, both on a national level, but how will it integrate with devolved areas? A big move towards devolution. We've now got metro mayors across quite big swathes of England, and then 2028, most of England will be covered by mayors or bigger unitary authorities. So there's a lot to do at a design level at that stage. What sometimes is forgotten, though, is that there's also work to do to deliver every day a railway which works for passengers and works for freight. And I think sometimes that's lost in the conversation at the moment. So one thing which we do on behalf of our authorities, and to also be a bit of a critical friend, shall we say, to Network Rail and GBR, is actually you've got to remember what's happening on a day-to-day basis and support the sector, as well as you're trying to reform the sector to deliver broader, better outcomes. Coming back to the role of freight in what it looks like, a devolved landscape, I'm quite optimistic. And we'll probably cover a bit more of this about why. I mean, you have to do this job to be optimistic. If you're pessimistic, then you're in the wrong job in some ways. I have to be optimistic about change. So we can cover some of the reasons why I think there is some real opportunity for the rail sector as a whole, not just for what the benefits are for passengers, but also the benefits for the rail, for the freight sector. So we'll cover some more of that. But for me, I think fundamentally what shouldn't be forgotten about through what is at a high level, a period of change, is the people who are doing the work every day and the people who are running a railway every day, and the suppliers, the contractors, many of the people here today. And I think sometimes we can easily lose sight of actually how that affects everyday journeys. So yeah, I'll leave it there. I'll let Richard pick up. But good to be here.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you and good morning. I'm Richard Crabtree, Head of Mayoral Partnerships in a cross-industry team, part of the rail reform programmes. I lead a small team working with the railway locally, mayoral authorities and the department and have a mandate and funding fundamentally for the department. Our job is, as principally as internal advocates, to create the conditions for effective mayoral partnership as that journey to GBR progresses. We work alongside teams working on GBR design and implementation, the access framework, including development of the access and use policy, and the long-term planning process being developed for GBR. Crucially, we're also supporting the railway industry locally, who are working with mayoral authorities today. It's a really important message that we put out there, not to wait for GBR day one. This can and should start now. And in many cases, there's some great examples out there. So on that journey of building understanding, we're working with and through Jason and his member authorities. We, through that engagement, we've co-produced the practitioner guide. Actually, I had a copy with me and I was going to waive it, but no matter. And developed case studies. We are leading the engagement, facilitating the engagement on rail reform at a national level alongside that is increasingly happening with and through the railway locally. In terms of the sort of the construct of this session, I guess, and it came through actually interestingly in what you said as well, Peter, it's quite a common frame, isn't it, of X versus Y as we move into that directing mind construct, freights versus mares, in-city versus local, and so forth. And it's crucial through transparent decision-making that how those trade-offs are reconciled is as transparent as possible. And we mustn't hide from the fact that there will be trade-offs and the hard work that's going into the access and use policy, in particular the access framework, the accountability framework, and the department's now published outline details of that in the last week or two. It's crucial about how this system works, and we're moving into a very, very different role in that. And that, to make that work, everybody needs to be really clear about their own role. And I think that's one of the big changes that's coming for the mayoral authorities themselves, having a statutory role. With that comes an accountability as well. And that is the basis for how much more effective and transparent decisions can be made in future. I'm sure we'll get into the nuts and bolts of that through the discussion, so I shall leave it there.
Well, thank you for that. I will warn you all that sorry to waving at people now, I do expect audience participation, so we will be opening up to Q&A for the last 15-10 minutes or so of the session, so do have your questions ready. But a couple of words came through each of your introductions just there, so I want to pick up first of all on that, the debate around access, and looking at that through the lens of, so for example, you mentioned 90 members, RFG's got however many members did you say you have? 130 freight interested entities, 90 members within the UTG, however many MCAs that we already have, and that number is growing. And if we think about the role of the Metro Mayor, ultimately they want to represent the best interests of the people within their geography. How do we address this, the different demands and needs for access against that really complex canvas of so many different stakeholders' requirements? And within that, what is the role of a rail executive, for example? Who'd like to go first?
You go first. You set it up.
No, I did.
It's your fault.
So, I think the first thing to say, everyone's role in this is entirely legitimate.
Yeah.
And it's everybody's role then to make sure and hold GBR actually as the directing mind to account for how it resolves transparently those trade-offs. Achieving strategic alignment early on is a massive part of that. I think there's something inherent about the GBR model. You may have heard about the inverted pyramid, the primacy, the powerhouses of GBR in terms of the business units. And I was taken by a recent interview with Lawrence Bowman, actually, that Green Signals did, where he spoke about his role as effectively a proxy business unit lead for the future, in being proximate not just to the places, but actually to the freight customers in that place, and his role And in future, I think this is entirely, transmissible into that GBR model of helping to reconcile the statutory freight target as well as the other statutory roles that GBR is going to have to reconcile. So, like I say, clarity of accountability and where those decisions have been made and transparency.
So, you're doing particularly well on putting a particularly nice gloss on it. This is not going to be, it's going to be a challenge. That's the bottom line.
It already is.
It's going to be a challenge. I think, let's just raise it up a bit. I mean, it's really supportive of the journey that GBR's on, really supportive of an integrated railway, huge opportunity to recast what the railway does. So let's start from that baseline. But there is more work what needs to be done at a high design level to make sure that all those stakeholders who want to make this a success have their say. I think Maggie and I would probably agree. The bill needs some particular strengthening and some clarity around what that does for both devolved areas, and when I say the other legislation, but also what that does for freight. So I think there's some particular strengthening what needs to come from that. And when I say strengthening, clarity as well. I think so at a particular level, there needs to be a great level of clarity about what those relationships will look like, and what statutory actually means in practice, rather than, I'm not meaning to be glib here, but rather than just a word on a piece of paper. And I think that applies for both devolved areas and for the freight sector, and even open access as well. I think there's a bit of discussion there. So, but when you're looking at actually how do you allocate track space, there are going to be challenges, and there will be winners and losers. That is going to happen. What makes me optimistic from a devolved perspective is that through devolution, what you do have, picking up on what Peter said, is local areas, I think, now have a much stronger vision and identity about what they want to achieve. What they have had to present to get more powers and accountability in a broader sense is, this is what we're going to do for growth. This is what we're going to do for local transport. This is what we believe this region, as part of maybe a greater connected region, say, I live in Manchester, so this is what we will do as an area. And within that, they're doing a much better process of planning, of spatial planning. Greater Manchester has a spatial plan. You know, if you're an investor in trade, in business, you know where you want to put your logistics hubs, where you want to build out your employment zones. And I think that will make it a much easier proposition to then actually design a railway which is both responsive as part of an integrated network, but also allows growth within freight, because all of our metro areas all see freight, and I did some research yesterday, before today, all of them in their local growth plans have got freight as something which is really important about generating and helping support their local economy. So the aspiration's there, the will is there, but we're not there yet on how this is actually going to work in a where you sat round a table and saying, right, actually we're going to take that for passenger services and that track at 2 o'clock in the morning will be for freight. Let's be honest, we're not at that stage, and it will be a challenge, but I'm optimistic that there's a bit more clarity. In freight sector is amazing. I mean, looking at that new, is it 990, is it?
99.
Yeah, 90, I mean, wow, that's like...
You want to go and if you go up to it later and kiss it, you know.
Yeah, it's amazing. So I'm optimistic, yeah, but we have to be also realistic that it ain't going to be a walk in the park.
Look, I think you bang on, Jess, and I characterise a lot of the debate that happens about GBR as fluffy rabbits. Of course it's lovely, yeah? Of course it's going to be better and just more, it's going to be more flexible but more secure, and we're going to make trade-offs, and the sun will always shine, it'll never rain at Rail Live, Ryan. And actually we're 1 year and 1 summer holiday from go live, and you cannot yet tell me what the new access policy is. And yet I've got members who want to run trains, and they want to know, can they bid for a right? or not bid for a right, or when can they stop bidding for rights? You know, I won't bore you with all the questions that we're asking, but most of the questions that we're asking, we haven't yet converted the fluffy rabbits. And that's what I think from a temporal point of view, that is now a worry, because we're running up against people who are going to be taking real life decisions about real life investments in a framework that is not yet pinned down. That is a real nervousness. And I think that sort of trade-off point, I mean, we've been talking about trade-off for years, right? And Network Rail can't work out how to do a trade-off, and they don't actually own any of the passenger trains. So actually, in a world where GBR does, that gets harder. Because what is that trade-off, right? Because if you took, you know, an intercity train, that will return hard cash to GBR. Bingo, right? Great, everyone loves that. But if you take some of the urban trains that Jason's members and Peter wants to run, they're delivering massive social value, but they might need an operating subsidy. But they're unlocking communities and getting people to school. If you take freight trains, they don't return any cash, they don't need an operating subsidy, they cover their costs, but they're delivering global trade and building houses and keeping the lights on. So how do you trade that off? You know, it's a bit like kind of saying, you know, what is it you want out of your life? You want you know, happiness or food? You know, you can't. You want both, don't you? Right? So those rules aren't very easy. And to your point, Jason, about the train that gets taken off, one of the challenges I'm putting back is who takes that decision and how. So when somebody decides that train that's running for Coca-Cola Logistics can't run anymore, which, let's face it, we got very close to on the East Coast, who rings them up? You know, is it you, Jess? Do you have to ring them up? Or does GBR throw the baby back to the flock? Or does the boss of GBR ring Coke's head of logistics and say, sorry, mate, your train can't run anymore? And that's a really simple question, but we can't actually answer it yet. So I am optimistic that we'll get to a system. We have to get to a system. But my God, we've got a long way to go.
Exactly.
Peter.
I think from my perspective, it all comes down to what are the objectives for the rail industry, and who decides those objectives. Because there will inevitably be trade-offs, and if the objective of the rail industry is to minimise subsidy to government, that will deliver you a very different looking railway to one that's designed to maximise social and economic benefits to the country, or facilitate housing growth, or to get well-being across the country, or also all the other wider objectives of rail. And clearly there are tensions between those, and it all comes down to, yes, where will the balance lie in terms of central government, and indeed local devolved authorities having an ability to say, no, the priorities for our area are this, and that may well conflict with the wider national priorities. So those conversations are going to be real and very difficult. But also, when you look at the operation of the railway itself, there are also going to be some really hard trade-offs, because there's already big trade-offs between performance and capacity. And certainly from the work we do, we certainly see Network Rail currently being very, very risk-averse when it comes to performance, and making the case and justifying why that train won't create terrible performance issues is a huge challenge for the industry. And certainly the recent open access applications have all fallen down on the basis of the fact that capacity on, say, West Coast South has been the key factor, and the performance of West Coast South has been seen as the tipping point as to why you can or can't allocate capacity. So we need to work out how high a performing network do we want. If we want a 95, 100% performing network, then you're not going to be running many trains on it. Where is that balance? So that is another big factor in terms of subsidy, performance, social objectives, economic objectives, balance them all together. And is it a national government decision, or is it a devolved authority decision for their areas?
And just to jump in on that with a sort of pertinence to today as well, actually, we always take the view that we're just going to run the same old railway and make some trade-offs, but actually, what else should we be investing in? So recently there's been some faster freight trials. I think colleagues in the room have been involved in that. You know, so using something like a Class 99 or 93, can you make freight go faster? Then you don't, you know, it fits better, accelerates better. And we're a long way from that becoming a day-to-day reality, but people are looking at that. But what other tech have we got on show here, and what could that do for performance? I mean, my cause celeb is, could we replace tops? you know, the core system that rail freight runs on that is older than me, and I'm thinking about my retirement plans, you know, so perhaps it's time that TOPS did. Things like that. How is GBR going to modernise the tech and the systems to help support performance in other ways rather than just deciding on whose train doesn't run?
Yeah. Thank you. I want to come now to some, I've got a specific question for each one of you, and in no particular order. I'm going to come to you first, Richard. So I believe you've been in your role for a year. So what reflections would you like to take a moment to discuss for the year that you've been in this role, and what we'd like to see within the next year? So be a Janus for the railway.
So that's a good question. A year in, I guess I reflect on two things. We've been waiting too long, frankly, and the clock is running down, and there will be a lot more comes out next. Actually, in coming weeks, we should start seeing more detail around access to use, etc. But crucially, you may be aware I used to work in a mayoral combined authority myself. Then I worked quite a lot across the north, and now I've got a national role. I see the difference in the relationships all over the place. And the culture change that's required to make GBR work, actually, that is a real reflection. You see the different cultures around the country, different expectations that are framed through a lens of doing business that everyone's learned. We've got a generation of people that have learned of how to be successful in a very fragmented system. Mm-hmm. For the mayoral authorities themselves, many of them are resourced up for an old role, and going into these future roles, it's going to be very different for the mayoral authorities themselves, notwithstanding the change that English devolution is bringing. So the importance of culture change and in turn building trust. And we can do that by developing the detail, developing out the detail. I think behind the scenes, Maggie, you and your members are engaged. Jason, you and your members are engaged. There is a lot of work going on to thrash out that detail, and it's a bit frustrating because some of it's not out there yet. So success is continuing that journey of building trust, and for me personally, it's actually doing myself out of a job, because we shouldn't have a job like this in the centre, in a fully empowered GBR where business is being done locally through the business units. I mean, my catchphrase for this is partly a railway that mayors can do business with. And I think that extends not just to mayors, but to customers of the railway in general.
Thank you. I'm going to come along the line. So to you, Jason, I'm going to ask you if you could just let us know a little about the Mass Transit Task Force. I believe the research for that is underway now, and there's a report coming ahead of us. But looking at that, and then the different requirements of each of the mayoral combined authorities or regions that don't even yet have a combined authority, versus the difference in demand of those 90 members that you have, because even just within a UTG, you're dealing with a huge amount of difference there. So what's the task force set up to do?
So a couple of things. One thing which is more aligned uses fixed track. Urban Transport Group, we will soon be launching a call for evidence on what the government recently announced was a mass transit task force. We will be the secretariat. So if you work within the supply chain or work within anything around mass transit, I'm hoping to get a message today it's live, but I haven't had it through yet, so it's clearly
We've
not.
Got 18
so
minutes,
it will be live at any moment, imminently. But what that will do is look at how we can deliver predominantly mass transit schemes quicker, faster, from concept to operations. So that's a really exciting time, and hopefully it will report towards the end of the year, and it's got a well-respected chair around infrastructure. I think what is really important when there's an alignment in terms of heavy rail, there's just a mechanical dog just walked past, alignment in heavy rail, is that sometimes there's a perception, rightly or wrongly, that it's quite hard to deliver infrastructure in this country. And in some ways we get some of it really well. I mean, I go from Leeds to Manchester to commute. I have a lovely journey at the minute through Wakefield, where my partner's from, because we're on a TRU upgrade route. Amazing. Great piece of work, great project, on time, on budget, will be transformational. So what can we learn from projects like that about how we build stuff? What's working well? So I think there's some really good stuff going on. I think in the broader question around how do we support our members? It's a real challenge. There is a huge, picking on something you said, Richard, the world is changing and the railways are going to change for the better. I firmly believe it's for the better. But at the same time, you've got devolution and local areas getting more powers and more funding, which I believe is right. It's very hard if you're like in a smaller authority. How do you navigate this? There are some authorities which don't even have anyone who focuses on rail.
Yeah.
Some which only have one person who looks after bus, and they're running, they're the key for bus networks, which are probably worth £80 million. So it's really complex. Complex transport can be hard. But I think when we're looking at heavy rail, and what we're all here to do today, it comes back to the point I said earlier. We've got to find a way where, as a sector, we're coming together to understand what each other's positions is, and how we can work together to come with those solutions. I think I love that line of we are 1 year, one summer holiday away from going live, and we still have some really big things to fuck at. I think one thing that I would like to see is, and it's not my phrase, it's a phrase I've pinched from someone about the cultural change, what needs to come with GBR. And that's how will it be reflected from platform to boardroom? Mm-hmm. How will GBR change, or is it just a Network Rail with a different logo? And that's not, I'm not being disparaging about Network Rail per se there. If we're promised something which is particularly different, then actually what mechanisms are being done to make it feel different for the people who work in it and for the customers, my members, your members, who use it, and the passengers who use it. I think that's the biggest challenge, but also the biggest opportunity for rail.
Absolutely is. Thank you. I'm going to do a little bit of showboating for you. Well, you mentioned the task force about how can we do things quicker, more efficiently. Talk to us about 5 stations in 3 weeks, and what difference has that made for your community?
Yes, so in the West Midlands, we have been in the fortunate position that we have finally delivered 5 brand new rail stations, so 3 in South Birmingham on the Camp Hill line, and 2 in the Black Country at Willenhall and Darlaston. And it's been a really, really long journey to get those stations up and running. And lots of challenging decisions had to be made along the way to, just in terms of delivering those stations, but getting the rail service that needs to serve those stations in place as well. My colleagues who deliver these stations, which are fantastic. If you go there, they're high quality, they're really well designed stations, but they're only as good as the number of trains you can get there. And taking the Camp Hill line stations in South Birmingham, those stations were designed to be the solution to huge traffic congestion and travel issues in South Birmingham on a really, really busy, congested road where it can take 40 minutes to get from Kings Heath into central Birmingham on the bus at peak times. The train can do it in about 12, 15 minutes. So the intention of those stations wasn't just for us, we like to run trains, it's about solving a very real transport problem that exists in Birmingham. And for Willenhall and Darlaston, it's about creating new connectivity that doesn't currently exist. And Willenhall and Darlaston are between Wolverhampton and Walsall, big regeneration area, lots of focus from the mayor in terms of getting inward investment to that part of the world. But if you live in Willenhall or in the Darlaston area currently, you would never choose to work in Birmingham, for example, because you can't even get a direct bus from Willenhall to Birmingham, let alone... and so actually providing a station and a direct service that you can get there in sort of 20 minutes creates completely different opportunities. And it means that we can use rail to unlock much broader, wider regeneration and opportunity for people in the region. But we've had to go through lots and lots of challenges to get the rail service to serve those stations. And the Camp Hill line was a classic example of we had to make trade-offs. about the capacity in and out of central Birmingham to get those trains in. And we had to demonstrate the performance impacts, and we had to secure the rolling stock. And all that started actually at the start of the franchising process for West Midlands Trains back in 2016, 2017, where that was specified. And we've only now got to the point, all these years later, we've actually got the product there delivered and working for the people in the West Midlands. And amazing enough, if you provide a decent service, people start using it. And so we're really delighted that it's making a difference, and hopefully there will now be a clear key part of our rail network for decades and decades to come.
Thank you. And come to Maggie. After Maggie's question, I'm going to come for 2 questions from the floor, so think of your best ones, because then there'll be some questions coming out to you guys. So Maggie, reflect on a lot of things that have been said here, and you've got the context of your members work on the national scale, but then might work within an intermodal terminal within one postcode. And then if we think about that last mile, so we're talking about passenger last mile there, really, we're opening job markets by having accessibility to transport. So in that last mile context, GBR and Devolution, how does that plait together for freight?
So, I mean, I think, well, one of the core, so go back up to the very point. People look at GBR as saying, well, if we just structure the rail industry differently, all these questions will go away. And it won't, because there's always whatever, I mean, let's face it, the UK Railways tried every structure you could ever imagine in the last 200 years, and none of them have worked, right? But so the structure isn't the fix, because rail freight has to work at a local level and it has to work at a national level. You know, I run a team of 3 full-time equivalents that we're going to have to talk to 14 business units and 90 mayoral authorities. You know, it's just not viable that we can do that. So GBR is going to have to help broker national frameworks in a devolved context. Because if you are a customer who's got cement batching plants all over the country, you need a consistent approach. You don't need local business units charging you different rents in different ways, or different access, or different rules. When the trains get to the boundaries, we can't just park them up whilst the next route has a path. You know, we've got to be able to get seamlessly across now. So we need a national framework, but also at a local level, we need those business units and those combined authorities to understand the value of that, to understand that terminal's building your luxury flats, so you can't close it down and move it, because you won't have any luxury flats if you do. Or you can't put luxury flats next to it, probably either. That it employs people, that it generates business rates, and that in order to meet that last mile, you'll have to, you know, do something. But actually, one of the things that we're seeing in our members is that they're looking at things like electric lorries, which are, you know, cleaner and less polluting, and using them at the railheads, because electric trucks have got quite limited range still. So if you pair that with long-distance rail, actually, you've got a really lovely, you know, end-to-end journey. So some of the government EHGV funding that's going in is being deployed in rail terminals, putting charging points there so that people can make that mix. So I think there are some really nice synergies as well.
Thank you. Right. Any questions from the floor? Do we have a roving mic? So the gentleman there on my right-hand side, if you could say name, where you're from, please, and who your question's for, if it's not for the entire panel.
Okay. Can you hear me? Yes.
Yep.
Lewis from Porterbrook. So the Mayor of Manchester, Andy Burnham, who may have a new job on Friday, and then maybe another job after that, we'll see, has made a couple of comments about rail recently. The first of those was in Rail magazine about the contamination of the B network with new rail lines coming in from, you know, the operators locally. So wanted to hear the panel's reflections on those comments. And the second one was about a new funding model to revive the northern leg of HS2, using Crossrail as an example of how you could fund that leg going forward. So just wanted to get reflections from the panel on those comments.
There you go, 2 little ones with 7 minutes to go.
I'll certainly take the B network question. I think there's everything that's great about a mayor holding GBR accountable for the quality of the service it delivers. I've got something called the Merseyrail test. I've shared this with officers at Liverpool City Region. There's no good reason GBR cannot be as responsive to a mayoral authority as Steve Rotham feels that Merseyrail Electrics is to him in the case of Liverpool City Region. And if GBR can offer a mayor that sort of relationship, then it's a success. I think anyone who's concerned about GBR being overly centralised, detached from places, detached from customers, can only celebrate the sort of responsiveness that Andy Burnham there is demanding from GBR.
Thank you. Anybody else to that?
Well, I mean, Andy Burnham's on the record saying he doesn't really love rail freight, so we won't be getting my vote as Prime Minister.
I think, look, who knows what will happen after tomorrow? But I think, picking up on Richard's point, I live in Manchester, I don't know if people live in Manchester. There has been a complete change around transport is seen within the city region of around 3 million people. I think what is really important is that it's about making transport feel like it's something like we've never felt before out of London in many ways.
Yeah.
But also there is a really strong commitment about making sure rail, not just passenger rail, I think all rail shines as part of an integrated network. And I think that's the significant change that I'd say the Mayor's brought, Andy, and also let's not forget the Commissioner Vernon Everett, because if we can make every single mode sing and achieve its best potential, then that can only be good for the local economy, it can only be good for the passengers, it can only be good for growth and for freight. That's what makes and changes places. So, look, notwithstanding what will happen after the election tomorrow, our members are just focused on doing the day job and making the best they can do for their local areas, and still working with colleagues like Richard to make sure at a high level the design works and that GPR isn't just is more responsive and is more accountable and not overly centralised, and it actually delivers.
Thank you. The gentleman there with the glass with his hand raised. Thank you.
Hi, Rich Fisher from Arup. Just picking up, I think, comments that Jason and Richard have made about it's more than, I guess, the structure. It's also about behaviours and trust and capabilities. And I think, for me, that's not just within kind of the local administrations. It's also within GBR and at the moment within NR and DFTO. So we can do some of that stuff now. What's going on, I guess, between industry and Jason, your members, but also other bodies as well, to kind of create that kind of capability and embed that, because if we're asking people to work in new ways, we need to give them a fair chance of success by upskilling them.
So what I've seen in the industry, I went to Rail Summit in
Transport Times Summit.
Transport Times Rail Summit, and there was a presentation by Steve White. I'm sure many people know Steve White. I was really blown away at what Steve had done around changing a culture at a very local level. Now that the operator had been rolled in.
He talks about hyperlocal, doesn't he?
Hyperlocal, how actually before the integration, there was one team working on one side of the Eurostar line, one team working on the other side of the Eurostar, and they'd never it's like oil and water. So at a micro-hyper level, I think there's some really good stuff going on. Is that going on further up? Jury's out for me. I'm not convinced. And I'm not convinced, and this isn't being disrespectful, if you look at Jeremy and Alex, rightly so, their job is to make sure the railway operates, they're saving money and they're delivering an integrated railroad really quickly. And DT's job is to get the bill over the line and set up GBR.
Yeah.
And then there's a big vacuum in the middle about actually what do we do about culture? What do we do about behaviours? How do we actually try and make sure from platform to boardroom this is going to be a success? Again, I'm pinching that from Vernon Everett. How do we make sure that's delivered? So we're doing that. We're working really hard with Richard. We integrate, I think we were the last one. I wasn't the last. We have a partnership group, which we requested. We set up a partnership working group with Network Rail to start to think about these cultures and behaviours. And we're getting 30 of our members to meetings. I think there was one yesterday, was there?
Last week.
Last week. About how do we start to think how do we, I hate the word co-design, I mean, how do we start to think as a unit together so that we're not separate? How do we start to think about the railway? Maybe we need to think about getting colleagues from Maggie's team as well. So I think that is happening, but there's only so far you can get if you're doing it bottom up. You also need the leadership to start to give that direction top down. And I'm not totally convinced as I sit here now that that is being done.
Yeah.
I see lots of countercultural stuff in the middle. I mean, being in France, I would say it's like playing whack-a-mole. You know, you're going out and hitting down the bad behaviours. You know, we need to stop that. But I'm feeling we're needing to sharpen our mallet in a few places at the minute, and that's making me nervous.
Okay. So we've only got a minute left. I'm afraid if you want to ask any questions afterwards, but I've seen the next speaker is from a trade union, so I don't want to upset him. So to close, and this is where you are all going to have some homework. We tend to have a largely infrastructure-focused audience, but I am chuffed to bits to see so much diversity in the audience. But my closing question is to all of you. Pick up on your comment, JC said, you talk about what should be done to us, and as a collective we are being told that we don't need to wait for legislation, just get on with it, but then we have that kind of limbo in the middle. So what is your question to our audience, who are representative of that wider supply chain? How can they best support GBR and devolution as they're happening together? What would you like to see the supply chain do to help all of that achieve its best?
I think Maggie had a really good point. Innovation and ideas. If we're going to make a really brand new railway success, then bring your ideas, because seen a metal dog walking past.
He was here last year.
Waved, but nobody.
We need, sometimes innovation, do not underestimate the power of what you do in a day job can actually make a difference. Seriously. Whether you're a manufacturer, whether you're a miller, one small thought can make a massive difference further down the line. I mean, I'm an engineer by trade, and it can make a huge impact, not just on the construction side, but on the behaviour side. And I think if we can make sure that everyone in this room can put one idea in which is fed up to Jeremy and Alex, and let's see what they come back with.
Thank you. Peter, come on, because you've been quiet.
I have the job of trying to make business cases for rail investment. The cheaper and more efficient we can make rail compared to all the other things we can spend public money on, the more chance I've got of securing that public funding. So a cheaper, better railway, so we can get that public money into the network to get all those great benefits is really, really key. So all the innovation we can find to achieve that, the better.
Thank you. Maggie?
So Peter talks about trying to build some stations. It's taken him since 2016. The Class 99 was ordered in 2023. They're running the first commercial train this morning. So be more freight, folks.
I love that. And finally, Richard.
All this relies on massively open data, actually. So I think that's a space where we can definitely do more as an industry, as a supply chain. The railway's getting quite good at putting the data out there. How can we process it further? I think bringing that intelligence to that decision-making locally between the mayoral authorities, between GBR, with the wider markets, will be transformational. And echo Peter's point about reducing capital costs of projects.
Yeah.
In terms of speed and cost, because
No, don't just capital cost of projects.
Yes.
Just Spain coming in.
Quite, yes. Yeah.
Thank you. We are over time, but we're very much on budget. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. If you do have amazing ideas that you want to put forward to Alex Hines and Jeremy Westlake, we will find a way of getting them passed on for you. Thank you all very much, and enjoy the rest of Rail Live. And can I ask you all to give a massive round of applause to our speakers?